Hey there, so another battle report for the channel. This time it's Vampire Covenant facing off against Infernal Dwarves. And the list that I'm bringing is a list that I won a tournament with a couple of months ago. It's a little bit changed. So the Vampire Courtier used to have Unbreaking Will instead of Arcane Knowledge. And the Winged Reapers used to be in one unit instead of two units of two. But I think this is a bit of an upgrade to the list, because Arcane Knowledge, I just overlooked it. It's quite good. Basically, it's a magical heirloom, but it also gives you some extra range on all of your spells. And combined with Occultism, it's nice, because Occultism usually lacks a bit of range. So what do we have? We have basically in core a big block of skeletons in which the Vampire Courtier goes, and this unit has a static combat res of about 7, I believe. So it'll last very long. And then we have another unit of skeletons in which a Court of the Damned goes, so that's also quite a sturdy block. And that is just supported by hard-hitting units like the Dark Coach, like Vampire Knights, like the Winged Reapers. And then I have some chaff, and I still have a Vampire Count on a Spectral Steed. Even though he's not a Blood of the Dragon vampire, he's still quite potent, because he also has the Cursed Medallion to give him rerolls to hit and to wound against one target in the enemy army. So usually that's just enough to be able to dominate the field. But this is a very vulnerable piece, so you have to be really careful, because it can just die to one bolt thrower shot. So for my Infernal Dwarf opponent, this is the list that he was using. So he has quite a heavy magic setup, but he doesn't have the icon of the Inferno. And otherwise he has a lot of shooting. He has a total of more than 50 hobgoblins with bows. He has 20 citadel guards with flintlock axes, 2 bolt throwers, and a rocket battery. This rocket battery, it shoots so incredibly hard. Then we have the Doric Anointed, a unit of 5. Oh, it should have specified, but it's just 5 Doric Anointed. And 2 units of 3 Kadim Incarnate. So with that, let's go into the deployment. So we are playing Frontline Clash and Capture the Flags. So luckily for me, my opponent has way more scoring units than me, so the scenario is definitely in my advantage. So going into this game, I took one of the maps again, and this one has a lot of impossible terrain in the middle. Dividing the board in two basically. So on the bottom left we have some impossible, in the middle we have a building, and in the top right we have another piece of impossible terrain. So my opponent basically plays a gun line. I play an army that doesn't shoot at all. So I either have to just sit back and then hide for the entire game, or I have to just advance towards my opponent and try to push him off. Generally against gun lines it's a good idea to just make half of the army of your opponent not be able to participate in the battle. And yeah, the most influential thing in my opponent's army, I thought, was going to be the rocket battery. So depending on where that is going to land in deployment, I'm going to have adjust my deployment, because he has the rocket battery with an engineer, so it actually shoots pretty hard. Yeah, so my deployment starts out with the Spectral Hunters behind the forest, so that they can go in there and benefit from soft cover. And the Phantomhosts can go in the middle, because they can still move through the buildings, so they are also quite flexible at where they are going to go. And the Winged Reapers, I deployed them in such a way that one of them gets soft cover and the other is gonna be protected by the impossible terrain. And basically at this point, my opponent, I believe he deployed the rocket battery behind the impossible on the bottom left. And so at this point I decide to deploy my entire army, because I figured that my opponent also would get some more information from the drops that I would do afterwards, because I wanted to go for a heavy deployment on screen the right flank, because I get some cover from the building in this way. So this is the deployment that we end up with, and I'm not too unhappy with this, because my opponent also put his Torag Anointed all the way on the left flank, and that was the flank that I was going to abandon anyway. So this major combat unit of him is probably not going to see a lot of action. So then we start off with my first turn. So I'm just pushing forward my pushing part of my list, so the infantry. So they go both 8 inches forward just to get as quickly as possible to my opponent. So the Kadim Incarnates on my opponent's army are actually facing towards the bottom of the table, because my opponent is very worried about them being frenzy baited. I think in some way this is reasonable, in some other ways, and it kind of hampers his play a little, because the threat that Kadim's exert now is just totally zero. So the Vampire Knights, they fit in this very nice small zone close to the building. The Vampire Count is gonna cover the other side of the building. So he opened up his flank so that my opponent actually has to shoot against his flank, and then the building protects him from the shooting by giving him hard cover. And the coach can move up the zone, the field a little bit more. And yeah, this is what the movement after first turn looks like. So I'm not too unhappy about this, because both the coach and the Spectral Hunters are still in soft cover. And the rest of my army, I think I will mostly suffer some bow shots, but not a lot of it is gonna hurt me. So then after my magic phase, we go over to my opponent's turn. So at the start of the game, my most important spells are Avocation, Arise, to get some more skeletons, and maybe Hand of Glory on the unit of skeletons with the BSB to give them a ward save. I don't believe I managed to cast any of these. So my opponent, he moves up a little bit with his Torag Anointed, and I think he should have moved up just the full maximum that he could, because I'm just trying to delay his advance there. And with just the coach and the Spectral Hunters, I don't even want to run the risk of charging in, really. Because I could win together with the coach and the Spectral Hunters, but it's still gonna be dicey. And yeah, the coach just unsupported. It's on one end, I would like him to just present his Torag Anointed and allow me to throw in the coach, because then it's also not targetable by shooting. On the other hand, the Torag are still gonna deal a lot of damage to them. So maybe this turn it's not a good idea to move up yet, because the Vampire Count also provides some zoning. But definitely in later turns he should, I think. And otherwise he doesn't move a lot, but well, he does move with his Kadim Incarnate, and he deploys them in such a way that they're still looking down at this moment. So yeah, they still don't zone in any particular way, which was a bit strange in my mind. Because if they face either to the left or to the right, then they still exert some threat. And yeah, the shooting of his is not very consequential this turn. So he shoots some bow shots, all of his bolt throwers they miss actually, and the rocket battery also doesn't really inflict a lot of wounds. I don't remember how much, but I believe I actually get 1 wound on my Vampire Count here. So that's a very pricey wound. Yeah. So yeah, gun lines. Most of the people you face nowadays don't play a gun line. just because they don't enjoy it, I think, and also because shooting in general in the 9th age is not such it's not that strong that you end up with a matchup that you can confidently win. So I guess Infernal Dwarves is one of the few armies that can actually pull it off next to normal dwarves, because they also provide the necessary combat blocks that you can use to decimate the remainder of the army that arrives. Me myself, I found that with Empire you usually end up with still leaving enemy armies that are quite potent in their combat capabilities, so that you end up just getting killed once the enemy gets close, because your light infantry just sucks in combat. So then my turn. So the Kadims, they were close to the building, but still I could touch them with my skeleton block in the rear. So I'm very happily doing that. So yeah, I have a rear charge and a unit of Kadims, and I bring 5 ranks. I have a rear charge, so I get an extra combat rest for that. I'm expecting these guys to just pop on the go, and then I can overrun into the next block. And then, yeah, at this point I was already quite confident about the match, because I was like, yeah, what's gonna happen? What can happen? Not a lot can happen, right? So if you have this charge and you overrun, and you're out of shooting threat, and then yeah, it was all going pretty well. So we further rearrange stuff a little bit. So the Spectral Hunters and the Dark Coach go outside of the 19-inch charge range of the Taurugs again. The Vampire Count actually moves up into the Vampire Knight unit, because anyway, he is tall, he can look over the infantry and then charge later. So maybe I should have put him in the... No, he can't go in the Spectral Hunters. Maybe I should have used him a bit more on the left flank, or yeah, I don't know. Anyway, we go to magic, and then once again I try to raise some skeletons, and I fail, and there's not a lot of other magic coming through. I do manage to get a Pentagram of Pain on the Hobgoblins to heal my Vampire Count for 1 wound. Then we go into combat, and my opponent actually manages to stick with 1 wound left on his Kadim Incarnate, so oh my god. And then he gets to charge with the Hobgoblins on the flank of my unit. And I wasn't really that worried about this, because I still pack a lot of static combat res. But my opponent has this backstabber, this Hobgoblin backstabber boss in there, so the unit gets reroll to hit, and yeah, that's a bit of a problem, because he also ignores my parry to the side, and I have offensive skill 2 whilst he has, or defensive skill 2 whilst he has offensive skill 3. Yeah, so that's kind of a big problem. So we'll see what happens there. And as you can see here, I actually misplayed the skeleton block with the cord a little bit, because I could have faced a little bit more inwards to the rest of the army, so that they could countercharge in the event of a charge on my block. But I was so confident that my opponent would not stick with the Kadims that I would overrun anyway, that I didn't do that. But anyway, once the charge had been done, you can basically use the other units as perfect as you would want. Luckily I still have the Winged Reapers left for a counter charge, so that's gonna be hopefully fine. For the rest, he still just dishes out some magic, he dishes out some shooting. So he casts a Corruption of Tin on the Vampire Knights with the Vampire Lord. And I try to stop it, I believe, but I don't manage to do so. He puts a couple of wounds on the Phantom Hosts with some Flaming Spell. And Yeah, the Phantom Hosts, they don't really serve a very crucial role in this battle, because normally they are very good against stuff like monsters and cavalry and other stuff that doesn't have a lot of static combat res, because they can just lock it in place. But it's mostly to lock the combat units that you don't want to fight. Um, and my opponent doesn't really have any of these, so they're basically just ablative wounds that I can use wherever I want. As you can see, my opponent, well, you can see it a little bit now already, because my opponent also did a couple of wounds to the Winged Reapers with a bolt thrower, I believe. So against Vampire Covenant, I would say that this is a little bit of the wrong approach, but maybe it's also because of the way that I set up the army. But what you can see is that my opponent is doing just a couple of wounds everywhere on the field. So the Winged Reapers have taken some damage, the Phantom Hosts have taken a couple of wounds, and the Skeleton Block is going to take, well, quite some wounds. So that obviously hurts, but with one Arise spell everything comes back in this case, because you just get a lot of targets on which the Arise spell works. So this is not really problematic to me right now. So then we go into combat, and my opponent, well, he rolls a lot of dice and a lot of skeletons die. At this point I believe I actually have the 5+ Aegis on the skeletons, so that helps diminish the amount of wounds a little bit. But still a lot of well, I believe about 10 of the skeletons in the end die, so that's not even too bad. And then I get to strike back, I kill the Kadim, and I don't really kill a lot of hobgoblins, I believe. So I still lose combat, but I still get to count my 5 ranks. And I have a BSB close and I have the Winged Reapers close, so I lose something like another 5 models or so. So then I'm ready for a counter charge with the Winged Reapers and the Vampire Knights. And yeah, the other skeleton unit just advances up. So things are still looking bright, I would say. And then on the right I do a bit of a switcheroo. So first I move up the Dark Coach and then the Spectral Hunters. So if I were to move the Dark Coach further towards the center, it would come out of cover. By switching it up, I can actually keep both units in cover. And once again outside of 19 inches. Just to keep these Tarok Anointed away from my army. And the Winged Reapers in the middle, I kind of didn't really know what to do with them. This was definitely not a good option, because now I give my opponent a single target to shoot at with his artillery. So I already knew that they are quite vulnerable to shooting, so definitely shouldn't have done this. In combat, I tried to cast Arise once again, and once again I don't manage to. So what else do I try? I believe I also tried the Breath Weapon. I also don't get that. I get one spell, I believe. Something like a reroll to wound. But yeah, the magic in general was lackluster. So the Winged Reapers and the Vampire Knights, they go to town, and the Vampire Lord also does something like 6 wounds or so. And now the Skeletons, they provide the ranks, I believe. Yeah, they have more ranks than my opponent. So my opponent is not steadfast. So this is clearly an auto break, after my opponent still knocks down a couple of Skeletons. Because he is still in my flank, so he still gets the reroll to hit. But yeah, this one does expected for me. And things are not looking too bad at this moment, I would say, because I've gotten rid of the Kadims of my opponent, or well, at least one unit. And I got rid of one of the Hobgoblin units. And I'm quite close whilst not losing a lot of my army. So things are looking good this point, I would say. So yeah, we are struggling a bit with how this works, because what I'm seeing is that my opponent has a lot of units that can charge into my units once I do an overrun or a pursue, and not being able to tell which unit is going to end up where is a little bit icky. So if I pursue with my skeletons, then probably my opponent will get a flank charge into my skeletons with any of the units, and I'm not confident that they will survive, seeing that there are only 25 skeletons left, I believe. So I decide to restrain with everything, and everything manages to restrain. So that's good. But then we were looking at the flee move of these hobgoblins, and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the hobgoblins, I was choosing for them to flee in the direction that we showed. I believe that then you should rotate them, put their rear against the winged reapers in this case, and then move them up the roll distance that they did. My opponent thought that maybe we should just turn them around their center and then flee away. So if you have any thoughts on that, please let me know in the comments. But in the end, well, the goal of me was to have this unit of hobgoblins in between my units and his unit so that he could not charge anywhere. And that was quite successful. And I think it's also the good play to do here. Then my opponent on the left flank realizes that his historic aren't going to do anything if he keeps doing this. So he's trying to move up with this Torok Anointed and use the Hobgoblin hero as a chaff piece. So I believe his intent was to have the Dark Coach in the front arc of the Hobgoblin hero, but well, when we measured it out, that wasn't really what had happened. So next time he might want to be a bit more clear about that. But because in this way it doesn't really work to chaff my Dark Coach, because I can just charge in the Hobgoblin hero and take the overrun into the Torok Anointed. And yeah, that it is kind of a decent play in the sense that you can get some guarantee that well, there is a chance that not the Dark Coach and the Spectral Hunters will make it into the Toroks if you flee with the Hobgoblin hero as a response to the Dark Coach charge. So what I mean is that I have several options. I can either choose to charge in the Dark Coach and the Spectral Hunters on the Torok Anointed together. In that case, the Coach and the Spectral Hunters will just go in as they are, in the sense that the Coach will go in the middle and the Spectral Hunters will go on the side. And actually that wouldn't be too bad, I think. I can't see it right now in the picture, but maybe he actually pushed out one of his own models so that one of them less can strike on the Dark Coach and the middle row can only strike the Dark Coach in that scenario. And that would be a very good charge to me, because the Spectral Hunters are a little bit more vulnerable than the Coach. So having less hits on these guys would be good. The other scenario is that I first charge onto the Hobgoblin Wolf, and then if it stays I get an overrun. If it flees I have to redirect. And the discipline on these Spectral Hunters and on the Coach is quite low. I believe the Coach has 7 and the Spectral Hunters have 5. So that would be a big gamble. So in that case I would have to first charge with the Coach on the Hobgoblin hero, see if he stays or flees. If he stays, then I get an overrun into the Anointed. If he flees, then I can still chaff up with the Spectral Hunters. And yeah, I think thinking about it now, I think the best solution would be to charge in the Coach on the Hobgoblin hero, see the response, and then if he flees, take a discipline check to redirect into the Torok Anointed, and then you move up the spectral hunters to the flank of the unit and in a later turn charge them. So as you can see, what I did was to charge the Hobgoblin hero and charge the spectral hunters into the Toruks, whilst they had already lost a wound. And yeah, this was not the best idea, I think. And otherwise, on the right, I figured that charge distance for the infantry for the skeletons in the middle is a bit too long, and I really desperately want to cast an arise to get my wounds back on the Reapers, to get my wounds back on the Court of the Damned, which also got a couple of wounds, like 2 or 3 wounds from a bolt thrower. On my skeletons, on my vampire knights who suffered, I believe, also 2 wounds. So I really want to get my army back. And I think it's also possible, because, well, I only need 1 arise. So I go forward again, I chaff up my opponent so that he cannot charge on my winged reapers with his infantry. But I should keep in mind next times that Dwarven infantry only have an advance of 3, so the chances of them charging anywhere are pretty low anyway. And then, yeah, maybe this turn I played a little bit too passive, considering the fact that I was thinking that I would get an arise through. But eventually I don't even get the arise, because I get the magic card of 4 dice and a +1 on miscast. So I can still channel up to 6 dice, so I have 6 dice against my opponent's 4 dice. And with these 6 dice I do not manage to get 1 arise off whilst I try to cast it twice. So yeah, that's horrible dice rolling. Then in combat, so this is what you get when you charge in the coach and the spectral hunters together. So the spectral hunters, they have great weapons, so they strike after the opponent's Tauric anointed. So they are effectively just removed from the field, also due to bad saves on my behalf. But the coach just happily stays for now. And yeah, looking at this, I was obviously sad about the fact that he killed my spectral hunters in one go, because it could have tipped the scales in my favor. But yeah, as I said, I should just have waited, be a bit more patient, charge in just the coach on the hero, then either go for the overrun into the anointed, or go for a redirect charge, then move up the spectral hunters, and then I should be able to stick for 2 turns with the coach. And then if I get a flank charge with the spectral hunters on the Tauric anointed, then it's going to be way better for me. But we go to his turn again. Oh, what I didn't mention is that in his previous turn, he chaffed my infantry with BSB with a Hobgoblin hero that I then charged, that I didn't manage to kill, so it fled away through my great bats. And is now chaffing up his side. So yeah, we have a lot of small things that happen that are just annoying both of us, I think. But the downside is that still his army manages to function properly by just shooting. Mine doesn't do anything when there's so much just random chaff stuff going on that shouldn't be going on. So he gets a charge with his Kadim Incarnates onto my my winged reapers, and in my last turn I also again misplayed these winged reapers in the center. But they do struggle from the fact that they only have advance 6 and march 12. Like if it had been 7 and 14, it would have been so much better. Yeah, I'm fiddling around with these, and I'm not totally sold on them, I think. Well, maybe it's also because I didn't get any arises through, but They hit quite hard. Maybe I should try a unit of 3 because a unit of 4 seems a bit unwieldy and seems a bit overkill at some times. Whilst the units of 2 they seem a little bit vulnerable still. So yeah, maybe I should just try a unit of 3 of these things, and then I can still increase something somewhere else. Maybe I can get another unit of Spectral Hunters or Phantom Hosts in there. That could be a good one. Anyway, so we continue with the battle. My opponent shoots down 1 unit of 2 Winged Reapers. That I don't know why I put them just in the middle of the field towards my opponent. And my opponent also gets another Corruption of Tin on my Vampire count, so now he has a 4+ armor save instead of the 2+ that he used to have. Otherwise, my opponent manages to shoot down my Great Bats that were still in front of my infantry. This is actually not very consequential because they don't block my charge lanes in any way, because they can just charge anything within their field of vision. And then we go into combat, I think. Yeah, we go to the coach. So the coach manages to kill another Tower of Anointed, and then the Tower of Anointed themselves. I believe it's this round that they actually do quite a lot of hits, and I have to roll my ward saves. No, it's actually going. No, this is going well. So I just grind down the Torx a little bit, and I think the coach is well suited at doing this. So you wouldn't say just from the profile that it's so good at grinding down units. But the 4 attacks at offensive 5, at strength 5 from the Vampire with 3+ Vampiric, that combined with a resilience of 5, 3+ armor save, 4+ ward save. That means that it doesn't get a lot of wounds, and every time the Vampire does a wound, you get a roll to see if you get a wound back. So it's a very self-sufficient piece. So a unit of Torag Anointed of 5 is actually a match for it. But had it been a unit of 3, then it wouldn't have any chance at all, really. Yeah, then we go to my turn again. So I charge in my skeletons onto his warriors, and my other unit of skeletons onto his Citadel Guard. And my Vampire count, I'm a bit sad about the performance of the Vampire count this battle, but it's basically just what happens when you face a gunline with this model. Probably actually I should have just put him in the unit of skeletons and just kept him there. Just move him up together with the skeleton. That's something you have, like this cavalry model, and you just completely zone out the possibility of just putting it in your infantry unit. yeah, that would have been the better option. And then this round I actually managed to pull off an Arise, so I'm very happy that I can just put back at least a couple of models. So in the end, my opponent tries to dispel the big Arise that I cast, and then the Necromancer gets to cast another Arise at the skeletons. But it does bring back Vampire Knight, it does bring back Winged Reapers, and it does bring back Wound on the Court and a lot of skeletons in the unit of the Battle Standard Bearer. So at this point I'm very confident about the matchup between the skeletons and the Infernal Warriors of my opponent. Because I still have a static combat rest that is considerably high. I believe I got my my full ranks back, so I'm sitting at a static combat rest of 7. With the charge it's an 8. My opponent has 2 ranks and a banner. So he goes to 3, so that's a -5 to start off with. And then the way it's set up, the Hobgoblin hero of my opponent prevents us from maximizing models, so that's another good one to me. So this is the turn in which I have to break my opponent's infernal warriors, and then everything will be fine because I can just overrun into his citadel guard. And yeah, things are still looking pretty bright to me, I would say. But then we do the combat. So as you can see, well, I made way with my BSB to be able to hit the unit. Well, the first thing we do in the combat phase is to do the fight with the Dark Coach, and my opponent goes to town on the coach. He does like 6 wounds or so. So I fail to save 3 of those, I believe, and then the vampire doesn't manage to do any wounds to him. So it's like a -3, and the coach just pops. So that was a series of unlucky dice rolls leading to the coach popping. So that was very sad indeed. And then the combat against the infernal warriors also kind of goes in the same way, that I do a little bit of damage. And my opponent has to test at a -4 at the end, because he does 2 wounds and I do 1 wound, I believe. But he manages to stick on a 6, so that was unfortunate too. And then in the last combat, my opponent, I only get 1 impact hit, I believe, so I kill 1 guy. My opponent with his 6 or 7 attacks, 7 attacks I believe, he could direct 6 of them against my my court, and he manages to kill it. So that was also bad luck. But in the end I still have my 22 skeletons left, and they managed to break the citadel guard. And it was at this point that the camera had to start recording a new video because the file was getting too big. So you see a little bit of jump in time. But what happened from here between the previous recording and this one is that my opponent countercharged my skeletons in the flank with his citadel guard, and he moved up the thorax towards the middle of the field, and he reorganized his hobgoblins with characters so that they were facing me again. And if you tally up what I still have left, it's this could still go anywhere, really, because I still have my very sturdy block of skeletons with the BSB and old combat res, so they might still survive this the Citadel Guard countercharge, and then once they do, my vampire count can countercharge and just completely go to town on the Citadel Guard, and everything might just turn out fine. The skeletons on the bottom are actually facing the ballista, because I thought that I could handle the Citadel Guard with the skeleton block, and the Winged Reapers also. And yeah, then my opponent continues with his magic and his shooting. The shooting of the hobgoblins is very inconsequential, but the bolt thrower manages to smack down. No, it was actually the death rocket that manages to smack down my vampire lord in one sweep go. Yeah, so then the tides have turned. Yeah, so he needed 5s to hit, and he had 11 shots, and he manages to get 7 hits out of that. So in the end he does 6 wounds. I have a 4+ ward save. I managed to save 3 of them, and my vampire count goes to the ground. So yeah, that was very unfortunate, because even if he has like 1 wound left, he can still do his job at this point. And then the Citadel Guard, they smack my skeleton warriors to such an extent that I lose 7 of them, I believe. So he hits on 3s, wounds on 2s. It's a little bit more than I would have hoped. But my unit sticks, and it's my turn afterwards. So yeah, the Winged Reapers cannot get there. The Vampire Knight, he could get in, but yeah, it's not really worth it, because this unit it's not going to help in such an extent that that it will win me the game. So at this point I still have the objective because I killed one unit of Citadel Guard of his and the unit of Hobgoblins, and he so far does not have any of my scoring units. So he probably is going to get the unit with the BSB, unfortunately. But the unit skeletons that are against the Ballista now, he's not gonna get those. So yeah, that's scenario is going to me if my vampire knight is going to manage to survive. So that's a bit of a relief, at least, because I feel that the dice were at some points a little bit against me in this game. Like, yeah, with vampire counts, it can well, with any army, it can happen that you have just these very tiny die rolls that make all the difference in the world. And yeah, that's what I felt happened a couple of times in this game. Yeah, so my skeleton warrior block gets completely demolished by my opponent, and then it's his last turn. While the skeleton warriors on the bottom right are off the field, so he declares a charge with his Historics against my winged reapers, and then the rest of his army he tries to kill the vampire knight, and the vampire knight still has 2 wounds, I believe, and in the end he doesn't manage to kill it. So in the end we tally up the points, and once we have done that, we see that the Infernal Dwarves get a 14-6 win based on points. Yet the scenario goes to the Vampire Covenant, making it only an 11-9 to the Infernal Dwarves. Generally, I feel that I played quite okay. I think the plan should have worked by just forcing my army through these through on one flank. I think the terrain was a little bit nasty to me, because basically it's an open table with just some pieces of impossible terrain that can screw up your deployment, and the one piece of terrain in the middle of the field was quite useful, but otherwise there's not a lot useful terrain on the table. Yeah, and I made small mistakes like not tilting the unit with the Court of the Damned sufficiently to be able to countercharge the Hobgoblin unit, and just the Reapers, the Winged Reapers in the center. It's not the good play that I should have done. Anyway, thanks for watching, and see you next time.